No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to an edition of 100 Yards Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your host and producer this afternoon, Logan Landers, and joining me to talk about the Atlanta Falcons and their search for a new head coach, as always, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner. Mr. Turner, how you doing this afternoon?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic, Mr. Logan Landers.
Good to hear, sir. Good to hear. And today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the Atlanta Falcons and who we think they'll be hiring as their new head coach, as well as the tenure of Arthur Smith having ended earlier in the week. If you guys enjoy the video, give us a like, follow, share, and subscribe on our social media platforms, Facebook and YouTube. And also go check out our podcast on the Believe Podcast Network, available each and every single week on all major podcast streaming platforms. So, Mr. Turner, I'll kick it off to you. We talked about the Falcons Week 18 matchup, how that was going to go, and the potential fate of Arthur Smith. And he was the first coach let go before Black Monday. He was the first coach to let go, I believe, late Sunday night. And the Falcons decided they were going to part ways with him, and they are now on the hunt for a new head coach. So, give me your thoughts on the firing of Arthur Smith, and also who you think they could be replacing him with come the 2024 season.
I'm gonna keep it very short and sweet. Arthur Smith, a lot of people know, is from my hometown, the 901 Memphis, Tennessee. His father's the CEO and founder of FedEx. So I had a little more loyalty to Arthur Smith because I want him to succeed, being from my hometown. I would say this: in his 3 years, I thought he did a good job. Basically, I thought he brought in some quality football players. The next coach is going to come in and be over the Falcons. One thing, they're going to have some excellent offensive pieces on the offensive side of the ball. Granted, he might have not used, I would say, Drake London or Kyle Pitts or B. John Robinson at a level that a lot of Falcon fans wanted him to do. But at the end of the day, the Falcons football team is still, I think, the most talented roster in the NFC South. It's very basic here what happened to Arthur Smith, the quarterback position. I heard a lot of people talking about the play calling to Coach Smith. He got too fancy. He was arrogant. I can understand that. I really can. And in the National Football League, it's about winning games. And this year, they were the favorites to win the NFC South. But what doomed Coach Smith was at the quarterback position. Desmond Ridder. Now, coming into the season, did I think Desmond Ridder was going to be a guy that's not going to perform at a high level? No, I thought he was going to perform at a level that the Falcons could still win the division. That didn't happen. He played poor football. Costly turnovers in big games. We can go back to the Carolina game. That interception against, at the time, the Panthers, I want to say a 1-14 team. I can't remember the record at the time. That really was the death knell for Coach Smith. One thing, you always look at what people say when your head coach is getting fired, especially the players. And I didn't see not one Falcons player come out and say anything negative about Coach Smith. Matter of fact, several of them still said they were surprised he got fired. Well, if people watching football and you love football, I don't care if you're Bill Belichick, I don't care if you're Nick Saban, I don't care if you're Dan Lanning, I don't care if you're Eddie Robertson, I don't care if you're John Meredith at Tennessee State University. If you don't have a quarterback, and your quarterback doesn't play at a high level and plays poorly, in these times where we got football going crazy, gambling, the NIL, then your team is not going to win. And eventually you're going to see situations like this. Football coaches are going to get fired. Now, for me, the Atlanta Falcons, they still set in a good situation because they're going to bring in a coach that I think is going to be offensive minded. And he's going to come in, and next year the Falcons are going to probably fly. And I think with Arthur Blank, if I had to say one choice, well, two choices would be Eric B. out of South Central, 2 Super Bowl rings as offensive coordinator with the Kansas City Chiefs. You don't need no more explaining to me. And the other gentleman, Todd Monken. Think about what Coach Monken has done in his career over the last few years. He took a walk-on quarterback in Stetson Bennett and won 2 national championships. Then he goes to the Baltimore Ravens, takes on the ownership of having to work with Lamar Jackson. Some people saying the best player in all of pro football. And look at Lamar Jackson's performance this year. Lamar Jackson, we all know he can run, but what impressed me about Lamar Jackson right now at the Baltimore Ravens under Mr. Tom Monken's guidance is Lamar Jackson can throw the football. His passes are on money. And the offense they run in Buffalo is very, very successful. Todd Monken will be my first choice, a.k.a. Eric B., offensive coordinator with the Washington Commanders. And all I can say is I wish you love and respect, Coach Smith. I'm never going to disloyal you because you're from my hometown, the 901 Memphis, Tennessee, Stack Records.
Yes, sir. Well said, Mr. Turner. My quick thoughts on Arthur Smith is, the reason that he got fired is just the Falcons underperformed this year. There's no question about it. We knew that coming into this year, they were the favorites in the NFC South. A lot of teams, tried to help out. The Saints spent some money in the offseason. The Panthers were a young team. Buccaneers were kind of a wild card with Baker Mayfield and crew. But the thing about the Falcons everyone talked about, Vincent, was that young offensive core. As you mentioned, those main three guys in Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson, who they had drafted this past year and was unproven, but he proved this season that he is a quality running back who is going to get a lot of snaps next season and for many years to come in Atlanta. But I mean, the big red flag for that team, though, it was that quarterback position. They never got it under stable. I mean, Desmond Ridder at one point had more turnovers than touchdowns on the season, had more fumbles than touchdowns on the season. You can't have that in the NFL. They flip back and forth to Taylor Heineke 2 or 3 times. Heineke had flashes of good play, but nothing that was ever consistent enough for him to be the starter outright. So if the Falcons want to get things turned around, Vincent, they got to get something consistent, something better at the quarterback position, whether that's drafting a young guy or whether that's going out and getting a free agent who is a veteran and maybe leading that team. It remains to be seen. But Arthur Smith, obviously the team saw that 3 consecutive seasons of the same record, going 7-10, finishing overall 21-30 record as a head coach in Atlanta, being there for a few years. It just wasn't cutting it. And that's what the team thought. That's what ownership thought. And they're now looking for just some consistency. They're looking for a way to get back in the playoffs. They haven't been to the playoffs, Vincent, since 2017. It's been a while for Falcons fans. And I think they're kind of just getting to their boiling point. And Arthur Blank obviously thought that, and that's why he decided to let Arthur Smith go. Best of wishes to him. I'm sure he'll find a nice place to land and do some great work over there in the NFL or in college, whichever route he decides to go. As for the Falcons, where they need to look next, I mean, there's a lot of guys out there, a lot of coaches right now with a lot of spots. I mean, the Raiders they don't have a head coach. They have an interim coach, but not a full-time coach. Obviously, the same with the Chargers. And I mean, now the Falcons and our team as well. You mentioned Eric Bieniemy, great guy there. I think they definitely look offensive minded. Their defense, they've got some good bright spots. Obviously, you've mentioned with Jesse Bates and also their linebacking core. Caden Ellis is a good player as well. But I think they got to get that offense first and foremost wrapped up, looking good. I think some guys like you mentioned, Eric Bieniemy, potentially Bobby Slowick out there in Houston, who did tremendous things with the Texans this year, took them as a team who was drafted top 5 in the draft this past season, and now they're going to be in a playoff game this upcoming weekend. Tremendous hats off work to him. And another guy who's also going to be in the playoffs for the first time in a long time, and that's Ben Johnson, Vincent, out there in Detroit, putting his work out there with how they have done things. So I think the Falcons have one of the better outlooks for a few seasons. Just in terms of coaches who want to come to Atlanta, who want to help out the team, because they got a young offensive core. They have a solid defense. Obviously, you can improve in some pieces, but I think right now the Falcons are primed. Once they get a head coach hired, and once they get that quarterback situation figured out, I think the Falcons are looking good in the future. Like I said, it is unfortunate about Arthur Smith. You never like to see anyone lose their job. We hope he bounces back and finds somewhere safe and nice to work for a few more years until he wants to call it quits himself. But it's been just it was a rough season for the Falcons. They had a lot of hype around them. A lot of people thought they were going to win the division. Didn't think they were going to dominate per se and win 13, 14 games, but still just another season fell short of expectations, and now they are on the search for a new head coach. As always, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner, it's a pleasure talking some sports with you. I've been your host and producer, Logan Landers. Once again, if you like the video, give us a like, follow, share, and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube. And also go and check out our podcast each and every single week on all podcast streaming platforms. Enjoy your weekends, everyone. Go and watch some football. We'll talk to y'all again on another